Welcome back. Around 650,000 domestic workers are registered with the Unemployment Insurance Fund, but the Labour Department says this figure is not a true reflection of the total number of domestic workers in the country. Well, speaking to the workers in Durban yesterday, Labour Minister UIF called on employers to register their workers. They tell us it's part of the department's efforts to elevate the rights of vulnerable workers. Let's find out how the department is planning on doing this. We go across to our Pretoria studio for the Labour Department's spokesman, Musi Zondi. Mr. Zondi, good morning to you. You say that the number is not a true reflection of the number of domestic workers in the country. What then, according to the department, is the real number of domestic workers?
Well, good morning. The real number of domestic workers across the country is over 1 million. I mean, this we base on the database of employers that we have. But it is quite clear that if you have over 1 million employers and we've got 650,000 registered domestic workers, that can't be the correct figure.
Now, when it comes to this low number, according to the number you've just given us, only 650,000 domestic workers are registered for UIF. Where has the failure come in? Is it the domestic workers not forcing their rights to be part of the UIF? Is it your department or is it employers?
It's a combination of all the factors. Certainly the department can and should do more, and we are trying to do that. And this is one of the areas, that's why we're having this conference or consultative conference, which we are having around the country. The first one we had in the Western Cape, and then we're going to have it in the Eastern Cape. But also employers. Somehow employers feel that registering their domestic workers would mean they are liable, and of course they would be liable because they need to take a certain portion of the payment, and it must be sent to UIF, so that when the domestic worker is retrenched for whatever reason, then they are covered for a period of time. But also we do know that there are a number of people who are not South African who are employed in domestic work, and therefore those are the ones that employers deem that they shouldn't register because probably there are no proper work permit papers and all such. And on the third front, the domestic workers themselves, they are the ones at the coalface. They are the ones who face all the problems. That's why we're also trying in many ways of reaching out to them and saying, go to your nearest labor center, tell us what your issues are, and we'll certainly try and deal with it.
Mr. Zondi, I remember when this UIF came out some years ago, there was a lot of confusion regarding who actually qualifies for UIF. At the time, it all had to do with the number of hours worked for one employer per week. Is that still the case? Or just in a nutshell, if you can, explain to me who is entitled to UIF?
Any person who works is entitled, especially at the domestic worker level. And when we say domestic worker, we don't only talk about the ladies that work inside the house, we're also talking about the gardeners who work at your home. It covers all of them. The point is that they should be able, if they find themselves out of a job, to be covered up to a certain point. So it does cover all of the domestic workers, whether they work more than 27 hours a week or whether they work less than that, because that's the measurement that we use, and especially when we're doing the sectoral determination, we say workers who earn or who work more than 27 hours, this is how much they earn. Workers who work less than that, this is how much they should earn.
Just to give me an idea then, Mr. Zondi, obviously there could very well be employers of domestic workers and, as you say, those who don't necessarily work inside the house only. Watching this right now, they haven't registered their domestic worker. Do they face any penalties if they now go and register their employee? And if they haven't registered them, how do they do it?
Well, precisely because it is a law. If somebody has not registered a domestic worker for UIF, that means they are breaking the law. And you know, it follows that if you are breaking the law, and at some stage when our inspectors go out and discover that you're not following the law as it should be followed, then it may end up as a court case. But you know, there is no need to get to that point. The argument by the minister is that a domestic worker is a very important part of our lives. If we go out and work there, they look after our kids, they look after our houses. So they're quite critical in the economy, in making sure that we are able to do everything else that we need to do, whether you're a judge or whether you're the presenter on TV. Therefore, it is important to look after their rights, not just because they are domestic workers, but because they're human beings as well. So they are entitled to all those human rights, as we'll be celebrating the human rights on the 21st on Friday.
That's absolutely correct. I couldn't agree with you more. A huge pleasure having you in to speak to us today. Hopefully employees out there and employers will make sure that they are registered for UIF. That was the Labour Department's spokesman, Musi Zonda, taking us to just after 9:15.
Know more about your world.
eNCA.com